is the 100 Days of Making Comics Challenge, round 4, week 11. I think I ran out of fingers. Greetings, people of the internet. I'm Scott with Serkworks Art Labs. Welcome, mad creators, to the underground laboratory where we create robots, aliens, zombies, and other imminent threats to humanity. Most of the time that comes in the form of comic books, because that's the kind of stuff I like to see in my comic books. Particularly, I mentioned zombies. My comic book, Young and the Dead, is a kids versus zombie adventure. It takes place in the 80s, and it's a throwback to all those 80s kid action adventure movies like Goonies and Monster Squad, Explorers, E.T., all that cool stuff. If you want a more modern example of that, just look towards Stranger Things. If you're into that kind of stuff, you'll probably be into that, and this is available at my website at serkworks.com. I've got 4 issues available right now, and I'm working on issue 5 as part of this challenge, this 100 Days of Making Comics Challenge. Now, if you've been watching these videos, you know the drill. I'm going to tell you about that challenge, and if you have been watching, then you know what it's all about, so just bear with me for a minute while I explain to anyone that this might be new to them, and they might want to know what this challenge is about. 100 Days of Making Comics Challenge was started way back when by a buddy of mine, Kevin Cross, who was finding it hard to find time in his busy day to work on his comic book project. And he said to himself, you know, if I just spend 30 minutes a day and, you know, keep doing that and multiply it, eventually all of those 30 minutes will add up to a lot of time on my comic, and I'll get a lot more progress done. So that's the idea behind it. But there's a little more to that, because sometimes it's just hard to hold yourself accountable if you're just doing the work, and if you don't have any way to kind of show and prove and have people say, hey, did you work on that today or whatever? So accountability is a big issue. So the second part of the challenge is you posting your progress online, and you can do that like I'm doing as a YouTube video. You can do it on like as a Facebook post, Instagram stories, on a Discord or something like that. And there's other people that have done this challenge, and there's a community around it. Or you can get your own people involved. You can do it together with a friend, but there's people out there who have done this challenge that are more than willing to support you. However you do it, you just every single day after you do that 30 minutes, you make a post, you talk about it. Whether it's video, you know, I would recommend doing some sort of video, even if it's a quick, you know, Instagram stories type of thing. So there's that. And the other part is that you do it for 100 days straight. And at the end of that 100 days, you'll have a lot more work done. And I found this has been very successful for me, even though I had a little bit of a stumbling block. I've done this challenge. This is my 4th round, as I mentioned in the beginning, and I did the 3 like flawlessly. This time I've had some trouble, and so I actually redid last week, was week 10, which I've done twice because I didn't really live up to the expectations the way I set it out to do. And I've changed it around a little bit for me. Once you've done it once as is, the way it's stated, then you can kind of play around with it. So I'm doing an hour a day instead of just that 30 minutes, and I'm not doing the daily updates, I'm doing weekly updates, is what you're seeing right here. So once you do it, once you're successful, then you can kind of change it around or whatever. And I would stick to the way, if it's your first time, I would stick to doing it the way it's intended, I guess. It'll be helpful. It's this way for a reason. So just trust in the process. But anyway, this has been super helpful for me as far as always allocating that time. I do mine in the pretty much the first thing I do when I wake up. I start working on my comic book, and I put that hour in. That way, you know, there's nothing else that's gonna come into my life that's gonna derail everything. So that's the way I'm doing it. And aside from that little speed bump I had a couple weeks ago, it's been going pretty well, and I'm making a lot of progress. I've made more progress today. So this is a page that I just finished inking, and as I was doing this, I started to think to myself, you know, I'm not sure if, despite my best efforts to kind of keep the look of the comic book going and match what it looked like back in, this is issue 1, which, you know, I'll be real with you guys. I've been working on this project for, I mean, it's probably been over 8 years, but it's sort of a passion project of mine. You know, it's something that a lot of times gets pushed aside in favor of, you know, work that I do that brings in, you know, honestly, a lot more money. So because this is sort of a, you know, it's a personal thing to me, it does get pushed back a little, and that's one of the reasons, another reason why I'm doing this challenge. But I started to look at the work that I'm doing here, and I'm realizing I'm using a little bit of thinner line style. So I went back to the first issue and I started flipping through it, and I'm like, yeah, there's some changes, and there's bound to be changes in those 8 years. Because if you're an artist and you've been doing this for a little while, you know that you get better and you evolve and things change. And that's happened with my work, even from issue 1 to this is issue 4 here, and now that I'm into issue 5, there's always little improvements and things, and I get more comfortable with the characters and everything. And there is a little bit of there's a style change that goes throughout. And because this time with the challenge, I've already written the entire story. So there's 2 more issues. There's issue 5 that I'm working on, and it will conclude in issue 6, which is going to be a larger issue, but 2 more issues. And then it's going to wrap up, and eventually I'd like to collect it in one big volume. I don't, not big like this, but big like this, like a regular trade, I guess, 6 issues. So I started getting in my head, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I should go back and make some changes so the style kind of match up. And I had to stop myself because I'm here to let you know that is a road that you do not want to go down. A lot of people do. I've seen a lot of people do it, and it's problematic to say the least. And even if it's just, if you're like me and you just want to go back and make a few minor changes, like, oh man, the way I drew eyes back then, they don't look quite the same. Just little things like that may not take that much time, but once you start down that road, it's like, oh, I changed that, and then it's another thing and another thing, and before you know it, you're like redoing the whole thing. And like I said, it took me eight years to get this way. Now I'm not working straight through. This isn't a monthly book that I'm putting out. This is my personal project, so it wouldn't take that long if I like buckled down and just did it, or if I was being paid to do it or something like that. And I just don't want to fall into that trap where I'm just wasting a bunch of time, because honestly, when I do go back, when I look at this first issue, I mean, there are style differences, but I'll be honest with it, I'm still pretty happy with the work that I did here. And it's funny because it was so long ago, and I'm definitely a better artist now than I was, whatever, 8 years ago that I started this. But the thing that I notice is, back then, I spent a lot more time on the first couple issues that I'm doing on the issues that I'm doing now. Because if you've ever heard the expression, first you get good, then you get fast, then you get good and fast. So when I was here, I would say I was pretty good, but it took me a long time to put this together, because I noodled over every detail and everything, and I think that served me pretty well, because like I said, I can look back at it and I can see some issues. There's no doubt about it, things that I probably would change, but it's not, but it's because I spent so much time trying to get it right, because in the beginning I was just good. I wasn't fast yet, and I definitely wasn't good and fast. But now, I think throughout these 4 issues and where I'm at right now, I would say, at least with this particular project, I'm pretty good and fast. So even though it's not taking me as long, the work's probably still a little bit better. But because I took so much time in the beginning, I think it still looks good. I'm not really ashamed of the work that I did in this first issue. Like I said, there's some tweaks and things in there that I could change, but I don't want to go down that road, because it is a slippery slope, and I have done that before. When I started on this project, I made a promise to myself that I wasn't going to constantly be redoing that stuff. And that's why when I even thought about it, I wasn't thinking of years later, because what happened when I first started doing comics way back, in the 90s and everything, I was submitting stuff to Marvel or DC, I would have like a 3-page story or whatever. And I draw out those 3 pages, some sequential art that I would send out, and then I'd look at it, and then I'm like, yeah, I don't know, I think I can do better, and then I redo it. And then I would redo those about 4 or 5 times, and maybe I needed to do that. Maybe I needed to do that to get that out of my system. Maybe that's something that every artist needs to do. But I didn't want to get in the trap of doing that with everything, because then when I started my first, personal, like, independent comic book project, one that I owned, and I realized that that's the path that I really wanted to go down. I wanted to create the work that I want to do, not necessarily work for a company. So once I made that decision, I started working on my own project. Then I went through the same thing again. I've got pages here, and I've showed them before in other videos where I showed round 1, round 2, round 3, up to round 4, and it did get better, but if I would have just, I think, spent the time in that first one, like I did with this, to get it decent, you know, even though I wasn't fast yet, and I wasn't good and fast, I was good. And I didn't like skimp, and I didn't try to, you know, rush the process or anything. And because of that, it looked, I think it still holds up pretty well. If this is something that you struggle with, think about this, because this is something that I had to think about. You know, because when I'm like, it just doesn't look quite the same, and because it's not like a super long running comic book, it's, you know, it's 6 issues, but I've been working on it so long, it's a shorter amount of time for you to start seeing those style changes. But even with that, if you do look at some of those long running comics that are done by the same artist, particularly like comic strips, like if you look at the Peanuts, if you've ever looked at an early Charles Schulz Peanuts, you'll know that the characters are vastly different from the way you see them now, and the way they appear in like cartoons, and pretty much how they appeared in the comic strips towards the end. If you look back, the characters a lot different, little squatter and everything. Snoopy in particular doesn't even really look like the same character. He's got a little more angular face, looks a little more like a dog than like a cartoon version. But what happens when you work on these long projects, you learn to sort of streamline your process, and you learn, you know, what took you 6 lines before, you could do it in 3, and it just becomes smoother. And when you're doing this on a daily basis, it kind of boils it down to its essence. So you do see that progress. If you get a collection of the, you know, the history of Peanuts, you're going to see that change, and that's all right. You know, and that's part of what I'm trying to wrap my head around, and I'm trying to be comfortable with, is that there's going to be an evolution from, you know, a little bit, and some people might not even notice. I don't think it's that far off, but there's little things that I notice, and as artists, we're our worst critics. So when I look at that, you know, it's like, you know, I get this thing in my head saying, oh, maybe I should change that, but then I just remember, you know, we look at Peanuts, or look at, like, another example would be like The Simpsons. If you've seen early Simpsons episode, you'll know they're very different. And even the voices are different, even though they're the same voice actors, it took the actors a little while to get comfortable with those particular characters. So when you look back at like the first Simpsons episodes, or the ones that were like on the Tracy Ullman show, the little shorts, you'll see it's very different than what you see now. But that's okay. I do like that evolution, and I'm comfortable with, once I collect this, for people to see that evolution. Because the last thing I want to do is fall into that redrawing, you know, trap, because I've been there before, and it's not fun. So, you know, so I'm anytime, you know, that voice in my head, you know, starts acting up again, like, you know, it's like the devil and the angel on your shoulders, like, oh man, you should redo that. And the angel's like, no, it's okay, it's fine the way it is. I gotta start listening to the angel, because, yeah, really, it's, you know, I don't want to spend a bunch of time redoing it, because a lot of this, like I said, is in my own head. Most people are going to be fine. They might not even notice. And if they do, it's cool, because think about it. I like looking at old, you know, cartoons that kind of the styles change, and see how it evolved and everything like that. When I think of this project that I'm working on, Young and the Dead, and how long I've worked on it, I realize that it's been a journey, and I want the finished product to reflect that journey. I want you to be able to see that journey in motion, and how it's changed, and how it's evolved, and everything like that. So that's sort of the conclusion I came to, and it's one that I want to impart to you guys, because I think it's important, especially for younger artists. Now maybe you weren't quite where I was, where you are now, or whatever. I don't know. Maybe you're beyond where I am. But maybe your work isn't quite, even like if you've been working on a book for like few issues and your stuff is vastly different. Like here I could say confidently that I was good, you know, then again, then I get fast, then I get good and fast. But if your work, you don't think it's good, that's all right. You know, just get to that point, do your story, wrap it up, and then, you know, I'm a big advocate of do the best you can in the moment. And you don't have to go back and redo it. But what you can do is just start a new project, and then the next project will be a little better, and you'll grow with that. So I was already pretty confident here. Again, things I could change if I wanted to, but I'm just gonna let it be the way it is, and I'm gonna move on, and I just want to show that journey. But I want to know from you guys, have you guys struggled with this, where you're constantly redoing your artwork? Have you ever done a book and then totally scrapped it? Because, you know, it's been said by a lot of people, and it gets thrown out a lot, but it truly is, it's a true statement when you hear that, finish is better than perfect. You're never going to get it perfect. And going back in there, trying to get that perfection, redoing things all the time, but it's pushing away the finished product. And I'd rather have something done out there and have it be good than just perfect, because perfect's kind of unattainable when you think about it. But anyway, those are my thoughts on this. I want to know your thoughts. Let me know in the comment section, and I will see you guys next week for week 12. That is all. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you saw and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Also, you can follow me at Serkworks on social media, and now you can support the work that I do on Patreon. Do you like making comics? Then go to Serkworks.com and pick up the Comic Maker Starter Kit. It's packed full of fonts, brushes, templates, and more. And best of all, it's totally free.